Hi, it's Jared from Strongroots Farm. We're back with our Build Proper Fence series tonight. We're working on continuing to pull our lines. I haven't got to the electric fence line yet. The ground is just now dry enough to, not cause more damage than we're actually want to perform out there. So we've got our top and bottom strands of barbed wire done. We've got one middle strand in the middle that will be high tensile, that will be dead, and then we'll have two hots in between making our 5 strands. So we're gonna continue working on that, and then I will get to the next part of building when we get to the electric. I wanna show you how to tie the electric. But tonight, not only am I gonna show you what we've got done and talk a little bit about how to do it with woven wire, I'm gonna answer some questions, and there has been a lot of them, specifically about goats and sheep. They think I'm only building cattle fence, so they want to talk a lot about what's the difference between goat and sheep fence and cattle fence. Is what I'm showing gonna work for you if you have goats or sheep? We're gonna talk about that specifically tonight. Stick around. Welcome back, thanks for joining us. First, I want to say thank you for all the comments, and I hope I address those. If I miss them, hit me up again. Email me if you'd like. All of those contact information is down in the description. But as we get to talking about goats and sheep, so behind me we have high tensile. So hopefully you can see it right there as it's reflecting against that post. Single strand wire, basically. Most people do 5, sometimes 6 strands of wire, depending on what you're looking to do. I think this is a very good fence system. It's easy to repair if you would damage it. It's easy to add on. It's easy to adjust if you want to add a gate somewhere. It also is easy to keep tight because you just go to the tensioners and put a couple cranks in it and it will always stay nice and tight. It also has a gap at the bottom, so it's nice and easy to keep clean with your weeder. You just simply go along. There's nothing to get caught in. So I really like this type of fence, but it has its advantages and disadvantages just like woven wire. So the advantages that we have to this are the disadvantages to woven wire. Woven wire fence, and let's go look at some so that you understand the difference if you don't know. Woven wire fence, I'm hoping you can see this well. Like you see here, it comes welded or tied. Most fence that you buy is gonna be tied, okay? Most of the welded stuff is thicker, heavier gauge and 16-foot panels, called hog panels or cattle panels or sheep panels. But most woven wire comes in rolls that are 300 or 350. If you buy a really small hole pattern, which is really the difference in the quality of these things, is this hole pattern. How wide this hole is, how tall these holes are. The smaller you go, sometimes the rolls get smaller. The smaller you go on the hole, the more expensive the fence gets. So for me, some disadvantages, like you see, it's harder to keep woven wire fence clean. Stuff grows in between it. If you hit it with a weeder, it really goes through. My son goes through an exuberant amount of weeder string when he weeds. Like, it's impossible for him to get 1,000 feet without, Dad, it's out of string again. And it really irritates me. If you can't tell, but you have to pay attention a little bit when you're trying to weed, if that's what you want. If you want to keep clean fence, which is why I recommend when you're building woven wire fence, and some of my compadres that are building fence don't do this, and I don't understand why. They don't leave it, they put it all the way on the ground. They don't leave it off the ground. So as you can see, whoever put this in, put the bottom wire on the ground. Just to give you my theory again, this bottom hole, whatever the height of this bottom hole is, a rabbit can go through that, a squirrel can go through that. So whatever could go through the square, that's how high I put it, or maybe at least half that distance high, so that they're worried about stuff going underneath of it, but it can go right through that hole. The con to that is yes, if you leave it 4 inches off the ground, they say dogs and coons and different things that you don't want to go through there couldn't dig underneath of it. My experience is, I don't typically have that problem with a 4-inch gap. I don't see dogs digging holes and climbing underneath, and if I do, they're not gonna do it very often because they're gonna get taken care of. So that's just my opinion. I like to leave it up so you can weed eat better and so it doesn't rot out, but that is a huge con for woven wire fence. Some pros to woven wire fence though, because there are many. There are many pros to having woven wire fence. It usually holds animals in better because it's a stronger netting. They can't move the wires up and down like, for instance, maybe over on this high tensile over here, an animal could squeeze through if it wasn't electrified, can move these wires up and down a little bit. So woven wire is more like a netting, and it protects better. If you're worried about coyotes, I don't know, bears, I'm assuming, I don't have that issue around here, but other animals like that, yes, it's harder, it's better protection to get through this fence. So typically what I recommend when people ask me my overall opinion, and you have to make your own choice, and it's really good if I'm trying to go over this in this series so that you understand the pros and cons and better make your own decision. But typically what I tell people is single strand, or multi-wire strand high tensile through woods where it's really hard to get to bush hog and keep clean, because it's just easier to keep tight and easier to clean. But typically I tell people perimeter fence, woven wire fence on the outside with an inside bumper wire, and then in all your internal fence should be high tensile, especially just for cattle. It's so much easier to keep clean. All the things we've mentioned, right? Now with woven wire though, there is some things to think about as we get into talking about goats and sheep. So most people say you have to have woven wire fence with goats and sheep. Now first off, I want to let you know I don't have any goats or sheep at this farm. I'm familiar with them, I've been around them, but I'm not a huge fan just because I don't have a great market here, okay? So one, I am not a goat and sheep expert. Watch some other videos, talk to some other people in your neighborhood, your friends, other people that are raising, get some advice. But I will give you my expertise on fencing when it comes to goats and sheep. I know people, I've built fence for people and helped people build fence that keep goats and sheep in with high tensile fence. Now there are some major differences in their fence than what you've seen me build spacing wise. So when we talk about 5 strands, they're usually at least a foot apart. When you talk about goat and sheep on high tensile, they get closer. You're more 6 to 8 inches. So you're running 6, 7 strands of wire, or your fences aren't quite as tall because you're only running goats or sheep. The other thing is goats and sheep, people who put in high tensile, I've never seen them do it where it wasn't hot. I have seen high tensile for cattle where it did not have an electrified bumper. I don't recommend that. I have an electrified bumper everywhere, but with goats and sheep, I definitely recommend if you're going to do high tensile, you have some kind of electricity to it, some kind of power. It keeps them off of it, and you're going to have multiple strands of electricity. This part of the high tensile here only has 1 strand of hot for our cattle. What we're building in the series will have 2 strands of hot. Everywhere on my farm that has woven wire has 1 strand of hot on the inside, and where we keep pigs has 2 strands of hot wire. So I'm a pro, electrify and shock them, right? Keep them off the fence. It's for their protection. It does not hurt them. People will say, oh, they squeal or they jolt. It definitely hurts them. Well, yeah, it hurt me when I grabbed it the other day too. It just kind of tingles. It tells you that's not where you want to be. It gets you away, but it's not damaging your animals. So I'm pro electric fence because it better protects our animals. It keeps them safer. It's more humane, I feel, than barbed wire or razor wire or whatever else anybody else would put. It just makes your farm a stronger fence if you can add the electricity to it. Now, as we talk about goats and sheep with woven wire, there are some major cons. One is people get too overly confident with woven wire and goats and sheep. They won't put electricity on it. And I will tell you, I have seen prison fences that goats could get out of. Goats are very hard to keep in. You see them climbing mountains and everything else a goat can do. They get out of fence. The other thing, I've seen goats die in fence, in woven wire fence. And that's something I'm going to warn you about when you go to pick woven wire fence for your goats or sheep. If your goats or sheep have horns, if they're not polled, woven wire fence can be dangerous for them. They can get hung up in it just like a deer or other thing with antlers, and you really have to pay attention to this hole size. So this is 6 inches by 12 inches. This hole that I'm reaching on, and I know it's hard to see on film, this is too big for a goat, especially at the bottom there. They can get their head in. They think the grass just on the other side of that fence is better, or they're eating the briars in the fence, and they get their head in there, and then they can't get it out, and they fight and they fight and they fight, and the next thing you know, you've got a dead goat. Now, Red Brand and these fence companies make it fairly easy for you. So when you are buying woven wire fence specifically for goats or sheep, it'll say goat and sheep fence. And what that really means is that these squares are smaller. This Red Brand woven wire said cattle fence on it. It has bigger squares, okay? So that's what you're worried about with woven wire fence. You can reduce the risk on woven wire fence with sheep and goats with an electrical bumper or 2 electrical bumpers that are lower. The standard, I think, is 30 inches for cattle. I would put that same 30 inches in for goat and sheep and then put another one about a foot lower than that. Just something to keep them off your fence and keep their heads out of there, okay? Especially small kids. When you get small kids, goat and sheep, you know, babies, not my children. You get small kids, they stick their heads through there with horns and they don't know yet. They can really get hurt and get hung up, and so it's not a good thing. So you have to be cautious. Goat and sheep fence, because it has more wire, because the squares are smaller, typically 4x4 really, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to come in smaller rolls. Sometimes the gauge is even smaller, just so they can cut down on cost, so that your goat and sheep fence isn't twice as much as my cattle fence. They make the gauge on the wire a little thinner. So you got to watch that stuff. You got to think about price-wise and what you're going to do. So as we've gone about pros and cons of each one, what do I recommend? I feel like most people want me to recommend something, and you know I'm not an expert, but here's my recommendation. And funny enough, it's about the same as the cattle. I recommend woven wire for your perimeters with electrical bumpers. I recommend you buy a smaller gridded fence made for goats and sheep. You put that fence in, you put 2 electrical bumpers on the inside, and then for your internal fences, start with some high tensile. See how high tensile works for you. Check with people around you. Are they successful with high tensile? I'll tell you, if you can keep goats and sheep in with 2 strands of poly, which I see people do all the time, high tensile fence will work very well for you. If your goat and sheep herd, whatever it is, will not stay in with poly, single strand, or double or even triple strand wire, you have to use the netting from like Premier One or something, like your chicken netting or sheep netting. You probably want to go with woven wire everywhere then. Your herd is not adapt. And probably, if I had to diagnose it without seeing your place, it's probably because you don't have a hot enough charger. Your fence isn't ground well enough, and your charger is not strong enough to hit them hard enough to keep them away from it. That's why you're having to go with netting without seeing anything. There can be lots of other reasons. I just think that's probably the number one. If your herd, goat, sheep, whatever it would be, is staying in with single, double, or maybe even triple strand poly wire, if you're able to rotationally graze using that poly wire, I think you can get away everywhere with high tensile fence. Change the spacing, make sure it's electrified, but if you can keep them in with poly wire, you're gonna keep them in with high tensile fence. The negative with using high tensile fence everywhere on a sheep farm would be predator pressures. So there's just more predators for your goats and sheep than there are for my cattle. So that's something that you have to choose based on where you live. Coyotes are about the worst thing we have around here. There are a few rattlesnakes. They've been one bear sighting kind of a thing, but it's not a huge problem around here. We don't see a lot of goats and sheep being taken down by coyotes. But if you have some kind of predator pressure, bobcats, whatever it would be, woven wire fence will help you. In my opinion, a bobcat is going to come through to whatever. It's going to jump it or climb it, whatever it has to do. But you're going to know your predators better in your area than I know it, because I'm just here in Ohio and I've lived here my whole life and I only know what I know. Now, since this is a fencing video and we brought up poly, I want to talk about poly wire for a little bit. If you followed my channel, I've been very harsh on people that say you can put poly wire fence up as a perimeter fence. Part of that is because Ohio, the legal laws in Ohio, if my animals get out and somebody hits them with a vehicle, I, the farmer, am held responsible. You know, it doesn't matter if they're a drunk driver and it's midday and a cow was on the side of the road and he swerved and hit them. I'm responsible, and I think it's ridiculous. The main reason I think it's ridiculous is because when I want to go hunt, I have to get a license because my state owns the deer. But if I hit a deer with my truck, the state's not held liable. So it's kind of, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth there legally, and that kind of frustrates me a little bit. But I am a big pusher on having solid perimeter fence for your animals. You have to have protection, and poly wire, poly netting, even if it's 4 strands of poly, is not sufficient for a person as perimeter fence. Now that's purely my opinion, and I'm allowed to be wrong, and you're allowed to have a different opinion and be right, okay? So that's just my opinion. I don't think people on YouTube that say poly fence as perimeter is just fine, get away with it. I think they're trying to get you into farming and into homesteading too quick and let you think that you can do this very cheaply. And it is a great way to make your own food and to earn a little bit of money if you're good at this. It takes a long time. Fencing is expensive, I get it. But I have seen more people quit this game because they have done something to cut corners and it has cost them dearly, whether it's a lawsuit or whether it's just they lose their animals. I know people who got animals before their fence was ready and they ran off. They didn't listen, they didn't do as I asked them to do when I was consulting, and the next thing you know, they lost $4,000 worth of calves in one night and they never found them. They're gone. Somebody took them, they went to somebody else's farm and that person wasn't honest and didn't search with who they were, and those animals are gone. They're not marked, there's no chips, whatever else you would think. And that will crush you if you're starting a farm or a homestead. And so with all that being said, I'm teaching you about fencing because I think it's very important. Well, there you have it. I hope that helped all those goat and sheep questions. I hope I answered everything. I guess the one thing when I talked about hot fence is how hot should it be? I'll get into that when we start talking about how to set up your charger and setting up the high tensile wire and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just tell you, I'm shocking around 8,000 here, and the hotter the better. I know people that use these 0.8 and 0.07 chargers. They just don't hit hard enough. I'm hitting at 7.5 on my charger. I have an i6000 from Speedrite, and it hits hard. I don't like touching it, and that's really the thing. If you can touch it and it not affect you, it's not hot enough. And so that's just kind of my personal opinion there. It should be pretty hot. And honestly, it's more humane to be super hot, because once they learn it and they learn to stay away from it, they never touch it. Whereas if they're constantly flirting with it and constantly getting shocked, it's just more stress on them. So there you go. That's the goat and sheep. Hopefully I answered everything there. We will get back on the fencing. I put out several videos really quick there, I know, and it's not going that fast because of weather. And it's a real farm, I have to do normal chores and I have a job and all the other things. So we've got our strands of wire in, and the next video coming out should be about the electric, how to set it in electric. And that video, the process for setting up electric on high tensile is the same process that we use to set up our electrical bumper wire if you want to put in woven wire. If you've already watched all the other videos and you saw how we pulled tight our fence, the woven wire is essentially the same thing. The only thing I did different, on the high tensile, I tie the start and then I pull tight. Whereas with woven wire, I only staple it. I'll staple it here and I won't tie this, okay? I'll staple it and I'll start pulling just enough to stand the fence up, not tight. Then I come back and I tie my start. Then I pull tight all the way, shaking it, getting it set where I need it to go. And I leave the tractor there the whole time while we nail everything up. And then I'll cut it loose one strand at a time and tie the other end. I will show that tool that we use, and I guarantee you I use a different tool than everybody you've seen on YouTube. At least I haven't seen it yet, and I watch a lot of videos as well. So thank you for watching. I'll show you that tool as we get into pulling fence, and you don't need some expensive, there are a lot of cool expensive things out there, but I'll show you how to do this cheaper as we go on with this. Appreciate you watching. Keep commenting. I'll try to answer those questions at the end of every video. Like and subscribe if this is your first video. All of the rest of these videos will be down in the description. Come along with us. Thanks for watching.